Chapter 9, Breaking Bread. Paul Bartolo's philosophy. When you are an artist, everything is an opportunity for creativity. And he lived that. When he drove in his car, when he laughed with friends, when he walked into any room, he was always an artist and always contemplating creativity. And it came to fruition big time on his first gig as an extra. Other actors might have been pissed to have no lines and no FaceTime for the camera, but not Paul. Other actors might have even been more pissed when they found out they were not even in the Alcoholic Anonymous scene, but would be walking out when Alec Baldwin was walking in. Other actors might have just seen that as extra work, but not acting. Certainly not art. But not Paul. He was 100% on. So when Alec Baldwin was walking into the room and offhandedly asked, "They got any coffee?" Paul didn't so much as break stride or turn his head. He just fired back, "What do I look like, a fucking waitress?" And kept right on walking. Alec Baldwin went right over to the director. They spoke for less than 30 seconds, and the line was in the script. "There it was," Paul said, his words filled with passion as he described the situation. Opportunity came and Baldwin saw it. Baldwin wasn't just doing the shot and walking into the room and hitting his mark. He saw it as an opportunity for creativity. The group nodded and voiced their agreement, and Paul felt wonderful. He felt right. Paul had no furniture in his living room, just a rug that smelled like chemical carpet, but it was still the hangout. The California Pizza Kitchen in Burbank was a shitty tourist restaurant, but what it really was the hub for the next wave of art that would sweep LA and the world after that. They weren't waiters and waitresses. They were musicians and actors and directors and cinematographers. They were artists, brilliant, blooming, transformative minds that blazed against each other like meteors in a meteor shower. They passed the joint and spoke with passion, and they were forming the future right before each other's eyes. Right there in the center of Paul's bare apartment floor, the future was roaring to life like lava forming a mountain. Paul was always going somewhere, a band, a showcase, an exhibit, a place where they knew the girl tending bar and where the drinks were comped. So when the bill would come to $13 and they would tip $150, flowing with joy and camaraderie. And while somewhere in Hollywood there were parties and premieres where studio moguls presided and movie stars wore $1 million necklaces, they were old news. They were ancient history and didn't even know it. It was Paul and his circle who owned LA. Paul even knew when it would start, when the world would take notice, when LA would turn its head and say, "What was that?" It would begin in the most unexpected of ways. A play. Paul had it in his head and he talked about it constantly, painting the picture for them all. Romeo and Juliet. He would play Romeo. There would be a live band right on stage. He saw it clear as day. It would be like nothing anyone had ever seen. It would be a cannonball shot out of the earth, bursting LA apart, changing the landscape forever. It was a late night at Paul's place after work. During their shift, a party of 10 had tipped $8 on a $300 check. They all ranted about the disrespect, but Paul was quiet. A thought formed. It's not just that they disrespect their server. They don't respect the meal, he said as much to himself as the group. "What?" they asked, passing him the joint. He took a long drag, smelling the fumes from the polyester carpet that covered his floor. Everything is an opportunity for creativity. The next day, he was at Rex, the hottest restaurant there was. Rex famously only hired career servers with 10-plus years experience, but Paul showed up cold and said he had to speak with the shift manager. Paul was glowing and irresistible. Minutes later, he was talking with the shift manager, and they spent the next 30 minutes on fire with conversation. "A meal isn't just food," Paul practically yelled. "It's about nourishing your body, but doing it together. It is sharing at the most fundamental human level. We're talking about breaking bread here. It's holy." He got hired. Nobody at the California Pizza Kitchen could believe it, and he threw himself into it. He celebrated the creativity of the food and the decor and the ambiance. Paul was a performer, and he performed his role to perfection each night. The money was insane. The first night, Paul walked out with more than he'd made in an entire week at the California Pizza Kitchen, and then it kept coming. By the end of the week, he had cash everywhere in his apartment, in pockets, on the floor, in his dresser. Then he got an actual check on top of that. He deposited it in the next morning and spent the rest of the day looking at the bank balance listed on the paper they'd given him. The next night, he didn't make it to a friend's showcase performance, but they all met up for drinks afterwards, and Paul picked up the whole tab. His routine changed. Dry cleaning became a regular part of his life. He worked more day shifts and weekdays. He bought furniture and organized a night for everyone to come hang out and celebrate that they were finally off the floor. He felt a strange guilt about the money. He didn't like that he liked it. He avoided thinking about it. He let checks go uncashed for weeks. The servers at Rex were nice, but the vibe was totally different. They talked about wines and chefs and Zagat reviews. They didn't bitch about customers. They never stayed for drinks after hours. Paul got home, sat on his new velvet couch, pulled a wad of bills from his pocket and let them spill out next to him. He wished he had a joint and thought of driving over to the California Pizza Kitchen to see if folks were going out that night. But he just sat there looking at the fan of 20s and 50s. Then it struck him. I'm so stupid, he laughed. That next Monday, he called everyone for a gathering at his place. Don't miss it. Exciting stuff. He even bought a vacuum cleaner and cleaned the carpet. He bought a tray of sandwiches and lots of drinks. He'd never felt more energized in his life. People drifted in, hugged him hello, people he hadn't seen in weeks. It was all happening. He could feel the glowing heat. So, I don't know if I believe in God, Paul started. But I think it's possible that a higher power put me in this job at Rex and did so for a reason. Dude? The room asked. Romeo and Juliet. You've heard me talk about it a million times. Well, now it's about to happen. It started. It became real. He found rehearsal space. He connected with the publicist he'd remembered talking to at a party. He reached out to the girl he wanted to play Juliet. The band was in. Things were set in motion. But then, motherfucking everyone started hedging. Of all the things to give him trouble, it was the artists, the nucleus, the people he'd sat around the circle and riffed about art and life and living with meaning, about what it meant to make your mark on the world, about L.A. and their place in the next wave. What the fuck? First, the drummer couldn't make the performance dates. Then Juliet couldn't get off enough time from work. The director had to bow out. Paul had to push everything back to the spring so he'd get the whole band. Save up, he told them. Get ready for rehearsals and performances. That means missing weekend shifts, so you're going to need to have a cushion. But did they listen? Hell no. They all kept going out just as much. He'd meet them for dinners and drinks, and the bill would be hundreds of dollars. He organized a potluck dinner at his place, hoping the idea would catch on and they'd start saving some money that way. He picked up the bill at a few dinners to help them out. Take that money and save it for Romeo and Juliet time, he scolded, trying to make it sound like a joke. Then he heard through the grapevine that they were planning to rent a place in Big Bear over Christmas and New Year's, and he just about went ballistic. First off, that was the best time of the year to make money in the restaurant business. But second, what the fuck? Spending all that money on a rental place? The guitarist from the band called Paul to invite him. He could barely believe it. I can't. I got to work that week to pay for the space for the show. My bad, his friend came back casually. Well, let me give you the address anyways in case you can drop in sometime during that week. We're going to be there the whole time. It's going to be awesome. Paul hung up the phone, stood there a moment. Then in utter disbelief, he sat down on his $670 couch.